What is your diet advice for vegetarians?
So yes, I have had a number of vegetarian clients, many of them Indian. And so my dietary advice is to emphasize animal protein. So dairy and eggs. And and not just any dairy. So, I'm not a big fan of just plain old milk. So fermented dairy. So yeah, I know like in India you have paneer, things like that, and there's also yogurt, things like that, eggs. So these are good sources of protein. I think that many um, probably most vegetarians, whether they're Indian or American or anybody else, are probably not getting enough protein. So when vegetarians come to me for weight loss, this is one of the things I emphasize. You got to increase that protein intake. It doesn't necessarily have to involve eating meat, but it would involve animal protein because plant protein is just not as high quality as animal protein. For example, if somebody wants, you can get like pea protein supplements, for example. These are just not as good as something like a whey protein supplement. So that's one piece of advice that I give them is to increase the protein. I think for vegetarians that would be very helpful. Probably a lot of them could stand to take some creatine as well because they're not getting enough. So yeah, that's about it.
And with so many changes in the political landscape now in the USA, and with RFK Jr. talking about seed oils, and what public policy changes you see which can turn the tide for obesity and the metabolic epidemic?
You know that that's a tough one because I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about the dietary guidelines that the government has issued and how they have a plausible role in promoting the obesity epidemic. And so, I don't necessarily disagree with that. But what you see in the Make America Healthy Again movement, among many of them, is they want more government regulations. They just want different regulations than the ones we've had now. Um, to some extent, those are good. I mean, now people have talked a lot about, for example, food additives in processed food and how, we need to take those out of the food and so on. And yes, that can have healthful effects, but I don't think that comes anywhere near solving the problem of obesity because I don't think food additives play a major role there. They may play some role. So it's hard because unless you want to be anti-freedom and forbid, the manufacture of certain foods or something like that, it's tough. I think you can educate people, for example, but and I think the education in terms of diet that has come out so far from the government, from mainstream health sources, has been severely lacking, and that's putting it charitably. Yeah, you can improve that. Um, another way of looking at this is a lot of people are they think they are really sure about what the problems are and how to fix it. Okay, and that is also a mistake in my opinion. Um, if you go back to the dietary guidelines that started coming out in the United States around 1980, and they emphasized um, consume less saturated fat or less fat altogether and increase your carbohydrate intake because they thought saturated fat clogged your arteries and so on. And so again, this advice plausibly led directly to the obesity epidemic in the United States. So they thought they had it right. And most people agreed with them at the time, but they didn't have it right. And so, what are we going to do now that has the force of government behind it that may turn out to be wrong sometime in the future? So, I think it's a tough nut to crack as far as improving people's health. Individuals have to want to improve their health. That's the big thing.
Right.
And I don't think you're going to get too far if people don't want to. So how do you change that? Well, there are things government can do. I think, I don't have these fully formed ideas. I'm not involved directly in this movement or anything like that. But, there's tax incentives, health insurance incentives, these kind of things. I mean, if somebody thought, just to use a hypothetical example, if I'm going to save $5,000 a year by losing 30 pounds, well, then I've got a pretty good incentive to do it. That doesn't mean they're going to go about it the right way. It doesn't mean it won't be difficult or something like that. But I think that is something that government might be able to do. I know that a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about this, but I think it's going to be a difficult problem, and those are some of the ideas I've had.
Right. So I think in Japan they have a law, metabo law, for taxing people, and this was something one of our guests on our podcast mentioned, who has read your book, Dumping Iron, and improved his health through your book. So I believe those tax incentives could work.
Right, right, right. Um, yeah, there's issues of fairness and so on. I really don't know what to say about all that. Health insurance, not just health insurance, health care costs in the United States are outrageous. And they're extremely expensive. Many people have gone bankrupt from having a health problem and having to pay doctor and hospital bills and so on. And but if you look at, for example, like diabetes, okay, so a huge fraction of healthcare dollars in the United States are spent on diabetes. And this is an entirely preventable illness, type 2 diabetes. And so you wonder, like, as a society, why are we all supposed to be paying for diabetes? You get into fairness there. So I'm not saying I have the answers here, but